district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, welcome everybody. We're happy to be back with yet another edition of the GOAT District, and today we're going to be working on ultimate auction strategy. So we're gonna help you out from start to finish, every part of the auction process, from prepping for it to how you go through the auction and just everything you need to do. And so today we're going to have Theo kind of being our moderator, and then Jack and Chris and myself will be kind of answering the questions. And real quick, I'm just going to introduce Jack and Chris. For those who don't know them, Jack is been doing NFFC drafts ever since I've known him, a long time. I don't know how many years, Jack, but it's been over a decade for sure. And also, Jack is the one who I probably met first in the world of high stakes auctions, and I immediately developed a healthy respect for the buzzsaw I was running into. I still can't forget the time that I think the first auction that I was in with you, me and David Dodds and you were sitting side by side, and me and David Dodds both built squads. We were like, oh yeah, these squads are just going to wreck this auction. And Jack is sitting there going, no, I'm going to beat you both.
And I did.
And he did. And you had a bet with Dodds, what was it, lifetime subscription or something to Football Guys?
Yeah, Dodds and I had a bet. He was so confident. It was $100 versus a lifetime subscription to Football Guys. So I'm good through at least 2035.
That's awesome.
There you go. So anyway, yeah, Jack's been doing this for a long time, and Chris as well. I think I probably ran into Chris the next year in an NFFC auction, and quickly learned I better respect this guy as well. And to tell the truth, in those auctions, there aren't too many people you probably shouldn't be respecting. The whole room is tough all the time, so I don't want you guys to get too much grief when you walk into that room on Friday night this week and start getting crap from Billy and all the guys. But, you definitely deserve to be here. There are certainly some other people we could have invited, but, we can only have so big of a show, and we're definitely pleased to have both Chris and Jack on here. Jack, why don't you let people know where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, my address is @Jack Law. And
okay.
Pretty easy to find. Look for the bald lawyer.
And Chris?
You can find me at Chris Eibl. Very simple. Not a big social media guy, more just focused on grinding through these high stakes leagues, but always enjoy chatting football.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so and then before we get started, make sure if you're new to the room, if you don't mind, just go ahead and hit that like button. It's real simple. It's right in the middle of your screen practically. Hit that like button, really helps us out. If you haven't subscribed to the show, it's absolutely free to subscribe. Just go ahead and do that. We really appreciate it. Helps us out. The more subscribers we have, kind of the more clout we have as far as like how our brand is perceived and presented to the various sites and also on YouTube itself. So it just helps us find new viewers. So both of those things help out a ton. So we really appreciate it if you can do that. And I think I'm going to turn things over to Theo here and let him go to town on the questions.
Yeah, so we're really excited for this one. This is like 2 years of organizing to get this show going. I'm so glad that we have Jack and Chris. I enjoy doing a podcast more than having to see them in the draft rooms this upcoming weekend in New York City, but that's a whole nother conversation. Why do you guys enjoy doing auction drafts versus snake drafts? Maybe start with Jack.
It's the strategy is so much more intense. The planning, the preparation. I'm not bound by ADP and where guys usually go in a snake draft. And auctions are just nonstop action for 3 hours. It's for a guy that's competitive like me, it's just perfect because it's nonstop for 3 hours.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I don't like being bound by ADP and whether I'm in the front half or the back half of the draft. It's just truly the opportunity to build a team the way you want to build a team. And then from a entertainment perspective, you're really involved anytime a player is nominated. So, I go through periods in a draft where I kind of have trouble paying attention as it goes around the other end. But like with the auctions, I'm engaged the whole time.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Chris. I'm the same way. If I'm stuck on one end of an auction, I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs. Or a draft. I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the action to get back to me. And with an auction, you just cannot rest for a second. You're constantly recalculating. Thinking, does this player fit? Does this player not fit? What does this player mean to the other owners? Should I bid? Should I not bid? Just everything's going through your head all the time. And it's a consistently and constantly evolving situation.
Do you guys like doing online auctions or in-person auctions or both? And what do you find are the biggest ways that they differ? Maybe we'll start with Chris on this one.
I much prefer the in-person auctions for a couple of reasons. One, I prefer the higher stakes auctions, and they don't have as many of those online. But it's also fun just chatting with just live in general. I'm a live in general is better person. Just the entertainment value out of it, like so many fun memories and just seeing everyone so engaged the whole time. Like I've seen Jack get up for a beer and someone nominates the player that he's had in the back of his mind, and he'll shout they think they're catching him asleep, but he'll shout $2, he'll put the beer down and he'll be on it. So yeah, it's just so much more fun live.
Jack?
Absolutely. In person. It's, part of the fun for me is reading the room and interacting with guys and watching how they bid. It's almost like you can pick up on tells on people a little bit, which I think we're going to talk about some of this with the psychology of things, but it's so much better. You can't do that online. You can put together good teams, but you just can't tell how committed somebody is on buying a player when you're online. So it's so much more fun that way to me when you're live.
Yeah, same for me. Just so much better in person. Just watching the little, dollar signs tick up on an online auction is, it's a little bit tough. And sometimes, if your connection just lags for, even a half a second or whatever, you can miss out on a player, which is another thing I don't like. So, I almost feel like I should be hardwired into the internet if I'm doing an auction online. But yeah, in person, it's just so much more fun because you really do develop. I think you develop a lot more. I don't know. There's a little bit more camaraderie within the league with an auction than there is with a draft. It's just more of a shared experience rather than people taking turns just saying names. Everybody's involved with it, so that makes it fun for me too.
And about how many auctions do you guys usually do each season?
I think in the past I've usually done 3 or 4. I'm upping it. I think I'm at 7, which is a personal record for me. So I'll try to keep breaking those records going forward.
Well, I got that record then. I got 10 or 12 this year. Some of those are online and are smaller, but on the high stakes ones, I think I got 6 or 7 total.
Dan?
I'm usually 3 or 4, sometimes 5. This year I'm only 3 for some reason. I just didn't get enough auction sign-ups done in time, and so it's 3 for me. But hopefully I can up that back up to 4 or 5 next year.
What is your guys' general approach to an auction as far as team construction? Are you guys more stars and scrubs, or do you like to have a very deep roster where you could potentially make lineup choices each week?
Well, I can actually tell you what these guys like to do.
Go ahead, Jack.
Let's do that.
All right, because I know Dan has always been far more of a balanced lineup. Likes to pick off values when they come up, so typically that lends itself to a much more balanced approach. Once in a while, he'll go big on a guy, but I've always watched him do far more balanced. Chris, tough guy to read, man. Chris is not a guy that has a consistent pattern. It's definitely more balanced than me, but I'm sure these guys will say. Sometimes he goes big and sometimes he doesn't. When you do a number of them, I think he diversifies on purpose to stay the guy that I can't read very well. So he's a diverse auction drafter.
Chris, how about you describe these guys if you have anything to add on Dan or Jack?
No, I would say with Jack, I know when I'm going into an auction with Jack, I know there's going to be 3 or 4 guys he's like really targeted beforehand, and maybe you can get him off one of those guys with a bid that's too high, but it becomes pretty evident quickly who Jack's after in these auctions. And one of the reasons it works for Jack with the stars and scrubs approach is he's really good at, identifying the kind of players who can fill out his roster and provide a floor each week. But I know it's I would say with both Jack and I think our preferred approach is probably stars and scrubs. I'm just a little more willing to, I think, be bought off that approach and go to plan B than Jack is. But I don't know if you disagree.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to say it with Jack. I mean, he's getting at least 2 stars, if not 3, of the biggest studs he possibly can. Whatever he can cram into his budget, basically, he will get 3 if he can do it that way. For me, I've definitely moved a little bit more in that way in recent years. I'm a lot more willing to unload the clip on at least 1 guy, if not 2, sometimes even 3. I kind of vary it around from auction to auction. I found, like I'll do one auction where I'm like, I'm going in big on 2 or 3 guys, and then I'll do another auction where I'm like, well, I'm gonna sit back here and just see if I can sharpshoot my way to a good team. So,
yeah, and I will say that's one of the things I learned from Jack, like because I was in the same boat as you, Dan, where my very first auction ever was next to Jack, and I liked my team. I took a balanced approach. I was just purely set on getting value everywhere. But I was like, those couple that top tier, you really need to have a couple guys from there. And if I had gone a little stronger there, I would have liked it a lot better. So that was sort of my mental note from lesson 1 from Jack, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things that Jack impressed on me real quickly after that first auction, he said, he goes, I don't have to worry about who to start. It's very obvious for me. He said, you're going to be pulling your hair out every single week. And he was right. I was.
What problems do you guys run into with stars and scrubs, aside from maybe a potential lack of depth to start the season?
Well, since I'm the guy that does most of the stars and scrubs, what I really have to watch out for, and sometimes I fail at, is not saving enough money. Overspending at the beginning. I'm pretty good at not overspending. Even if I buy 3 guys, it's that 4th or 5th guy that gets me. Like I have a guy budgeted for about 15 or so, and oh man, one of my favorites come and he goes for like 18 or 19. Well, that's $4 I'm going to wish I had in about an hour and a half. So that's my issue that I constantly run into, is making sure I save enough toward the end.
I think the big mistake people make, I'll go with the building depth. I think the big mistake people make with that, and why it's maybe a little less popular than stars and scrubs, is sometimes people think building depth means maybe allocating too much money to your bench, and players on your bench really aren't going to do anything for you. If you're in a 14-team league, that might be useful where there aren't guys on the waiver wire. But to me, having a team that has depth doesn't mean having a bunch of $20 players on your bench, because that's not useful to you. It's having, it's still being able to start 4 really good receivers, but maybe you're starting 4 third-round receivers because you were able to stock up on those 3rd to 4th round players because Jack spent $80 on Christian McCaffrey.
We're going to make him spend at least that much.
Nah, he's too injury prone.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And that's,
there's going to be a little bit of substitute.
Jack's a lawyer and a doctor.
Yes.
And that's a good segue. How do you determine fair prices for players prior to the auction? It seems like that's probably one of the biggest parts of anyone's auction draft plan. Why don't we start with Chris for this one?
Oof, mine's probably a little more nerdy and Excel based. I'll usually take a couple projections from sites I trust. I don't spend a lot of time on projections myself, but what I really try to do is find a baseline for every position where like that's the type of player I can pick up on the free agency market. Or in the waiver wire. So let's say like at running back that player is like 100 points that I can find on the waiver wire. How I base that is I'm trying to essentially do like almost like a baseball type like WAR analysis where if a player is projected for 150 points, that's half as valuable as a player projected worth 200 points. So I sort of put together an Excel spreadsheet that I don't actually do a lot of work on. I just shove other predictions through that sort of does all that math for me. That's how I go about it.
Jack?
Well, I'm a lot simpler than that. I get completed auctions. If I know I have a high stakes auction in a league where I wouldn't have normally have completed results, I'll set up leagues myself, get guys to join and get some. The NFFC, which all of us do, they have the perfect resource for that with all the average auction values. So everyone, I'm sure, just looks at that. And those are the best numbers because of all the completed auctions. But there's other ones like FFPC. I have to set up my own. And I know other places where I know guys are doing FFPC style auctions. So I'll get the results and I'll compile that and get my own average auction value. And over the years, these have just been dead on for me. So I know what they're going to be. And you wouldn't necessarily think that until you've seen it and you just see the prices are so close. So I feel like I know what the prices are going to be and I can really game plan after that.
Yeah,
Dan? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say what you touched on is really key there to any auctions for high stakes. Like you mentioned, NFFC provides great data. The other best data you can find is whatever your league used last year, but that gives you such a better ability to plan for your auction if you know what players are going to go.
Yep, for sure. So it's, I guess, simple for me, but really makes sense. And what I do is I take each auction that has happened before, these are auctions from prior years. This is basically 6 years of, or 6 individual auctions from like the past couple of years that I've done that are FFPC auctions. And so 2021, 2020, I think there's even a 2019 in there. And just basically what I do is I just organize, from the most expensive to least expensive player, what the bids were. And then I can do this graph and you can see from the graph, this is 6 individual lines here and they track almost identical from draft to draft, year to year. There'll be slight variations in them, you'll see like the blue line, there's some places where it started out lower, but it's a little bit higher in some of the middle sections. And what that shows is just that, there were more people making mid-range bids in that draft, and there was less money that went to the higher players. But for the most part, every auction, at least in the FFPC, is going to follow this curve. And so what I do is I just take ADP. I'll take a fresh set of ADP from a day or two before the auction from main events off of Fantasy Mojo's great site, and I'll plaster that on, and then I'll just plaster these auction values right next to it. So Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp are going to be the top 4 in some order, and I can see roughly where those bids are going to be, and I can go down, and I can see, when I'm about 65 players or so in, we're going to be down to the $10 bids and so forth like that. And about the last 60 bids or so are going to be $1 players. So I can just kind of fit it to my curve, and then I can, I've got a pretty good idea with that of how I'm going to, how I should be valuing these players per ADP. I might personally value them higher or lower than that, but at least I have a pretty good idea of what they're likely to go for in the auction. So that's the way I do it.
Does anybody have any other good sources to help them out, to help players out with setting prices for what players should go for, or is that pretty much covered in everything we just talked about?
I'll tell you, I just came across a guy I had not met, but he private messaged me. His name's Jackson Barrett, and he writes for Roto Street Journal. And he wrote an article in July that's on Roto Street Journal's site that I actually was reading it this weekend, and I thought he did a really good job putting together prices based on consensus rankings. And then he has an Excel program that he uses, and I was really impressed with that. So shout out to Jackson. Hope you're listening, because now we're buddies after I dropped your name on this. But it's really good, and I thought if I didn't have completed auctions, that would be a really good resource for me to look at. And I sent the link to Dan too the other day, because I mentioned it to him, and I don't know if you looked at it, but I thought
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's great for new guys if they don't have any numbers or prices to check that out, and I think it's a good way for guys to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, and if that's a link you'd like, you can hit up me or Jack, or while we're going through the show, I'll see if I can drop it into the show chat as well.
The only other thing I'd recommend is a little pre-auction prep. Is for whatever reason there can be discrepancies between where players are going in ADP and their average auction values. So sometimes I usually don't like to do it until within a day or so of an auction, just because our ADP is constantly evolving. But I do like to run those comparisons of ADP to on the NFFC site to average auction values, just to see where potential bargains might be in advance.
So we covered player pricing, and that's definitely an important aspect. But probably the most important thing to focus on is planning your strategy. You guys draft against 11 other really, really good players. The auction that I'll be at in New York City, just watching, is an unbelievable group of talent in terms of just fantasy football minds. How do you go about planning your strategy? We'll start out with Jack.
Well, my process is first figuring out what lineup requirements are and the type of league, number of teams. I mean, just some of the basics. And then I'm going to assess the inventory of players too, because every year it changes. Like this year, I feel like there's more running backs in the top, 3 rounds or so where guys are focused on. And I think that's changed as compared to the last few years. And then to look to see where wide receiver values are going to be. I think there's a tier there in the middle that's really stacked up. So I'll start looking at where I think the values are going to be, regardless of position. And then I will pick a few players that I'll stick in a game plan. I mean, I have 5 or 6 game plans I'll put together for every single auction that will take into account how it could flow. A wide receiver heavy one, a running back heavy one, balanced. I do that to see what lineups I really like. As Chris picked up, there's a few players I'll tend to really like, and Chris is going to probably pick up on a lot of those with the number of auctions we got this year. But there's always one guy that's going to outbid. So you have to be ready to modify it and change plans on the fly. And when I have those backed up, I can see with numbers in there what's the closest plan I got, and then modify it, and I'll pick that one out, and I'll try to hit that one as best I can.
Chris?
I would say my strategy is usually less based on specific players, and I'm really obsessed with finding discounts and value. I'll have that list of average auction prices, but I want to get less than that. And I want to do that whenever possible, with the twist of also making sure I acquire a couple first round caliber players. So I'm always, like I said, I'm always going to try for that stars and scrubs approach, but my preparation is more based on being comfortable with my own values and knowing where I'm getting discounts based on the projections that I'm using.
Yeah, I'm kind of between, I guess, the two. I definitely go through and I will look at specific player combinations. I'm looking for that combination or 2 or 3 or 4 that I can find that really fits well. And a lot of times it's not even necessarily specific players. There might be 2 or 3 players who will fit into a slot, and I'll be happy with any of those. Or there are some times where I might have one strategy that's built around, well, if I can get this particular player at this price, and I think that he's probably going to get nominated early, and I'll know early. I might have a strategy built around that too. But much like Chris, though, I'm really focused on trying to find the values in the auction, and so I'm just looking through. Basically when I overlay that ADP onto my list of auction values, I'll go through and I'll highlight the players I'm most interested in, and then I go back and I start looking at different combinations that I can use of those players to build a team out and get the right amount of money into my starting lineup. Like, one thing we haven't really talked about is like how much you allocate for your starting lineup. For me, I'm probably going to go at least 170, sometimes a little bit more. Jack, I know will go probably about 185 if he can.
No, not that high.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Something to aim for this year, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, definitely. So,
well, Jack,
what about you, Chris? What do you do?
I would have thrown out that 170, 175 number.
I did one on Saturday night, a league I ran, FFPC rules, and I had budgeted 175 and I did 178. So I didn't even hit 180, guys.
No, wow. You're holding back. I'm impressed.
And if you guys all seem to have multiple strategies when you're going into an auction, how do you decide which one to use during the auction? Is it sort of just being able to read what's going on and pivot as things happen, or is there anything more nuanced to it?
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at those first players. Usually, 1 or 2 of the top of the first round players is going to go pretty quick in the auction. They're going to come up for nomination, and I'm kind of looking for what sort of a price is that player going for, because that's probably going to set the tone for the rest of the auction. If Christian McCaffrey goes up and he goes for $75 on a $200 budget, I know, hey, we're going to have some expensive players in the top half of the first round. But if he goes for, $61 or something like that, then I feel like, I'm going to have to, I can probably pick up a couple of really, really good players here, but I'm going to have to watch my money in the middle of the auction because all those players are probably going to be pumped up in price a little bit.
See, I'm different on that. There's a lot of times I want to set the tone, but not pick one of those high guys. So let's just pick a different running back. Let's just say Swift, right? DeAndre Swift. I would expect him to go right at AVV, first one I put up. Okay. I don't think bidding's going to be high. Guys aren't ready to bid super high on him, most guys. And I think if that's a guy that fits your plan, and you have one of the early nominations, put him up, because I don't expect him to, if his price is 41, that's AVV on that. He's not going to go for 46 unless someone really, really likes him. And I think you can buy him, you have him in your plan, and So it just depends who that is, right, and who you're targeting. But I found that has worked for me in the past.
Do you find most auctions tend to start off a little cool rather than hot? I would say I feel like those first couple guys, people are a little nervous to get there.
Absolutely. And I think you take advantage of that.
Yeah,
most.
for sure.
I mean, once you start getting guys where we've known each other, it's hard to get those bargains initially. But if you're in a league with new guys, I would go in there with an aggressive attitude, because a lot of guys don't want to jump in right away.
Yep.
What is your guys' strategy with onesie positions, like quarterback, but also kicker and defense?
I tend to be the dork who starts in the first round with my favorite $1 kicker, because I'm trying to get every little advantage I can get. And if I know the Ravens are going to go or Justin Tucker is going to go for $2 and all the other kickers are going to go for $1, I know I can get the second best kicker by bringing him up first. And so usually with those cheaper positions, I'm just trying to get the best $1 player I can that I'm confident won't go for $2.
I'm a dollar kicker, dollar defense. I'll pick a mid-range defense that I think might start off strong for the first 4 weeks or so, or depending on what league it is, I might pick one that I think my team's going to be strong, which I do a lot. I'll pick one toward the end of the year that I think their playoff schedule is really, really good. For quarterbacks, though, I think that changes year to year. I used to be a guy that would budget in a lower number because I was happy with a guy anywhere from 10 to 12 quarterback. But I think like this year's changed a little bit because there's some interesting dynamic quarterbacks in that mid-range, and their prices aren't that expensive. So it's easy to budget in a guy anywhere from $6 to $9 this year and still get a really good quarterback. And I'm sure, the other guys see that too. We're seeing the results. So, it just kind of depends on the inventory every year and assessing who you think is going to be either a low quarterback for $2 or $3, like Lamar Jackson a few years ago, which was the ultimate, trump card for $2 or $3, or Kyler Murray for $9 or $10 this year.
Dan?
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. I will spend up a little bit at quarterback. I don't want to be the guy setting the market, buying Josh Allen or anything like that. That's I'll leave that to somebody else. But I'll look for, I'll have probably 4 quarterbacks that I really, really like, that I believe in. And it kind of depends on when they get nominated too, because and I'm sure we'll get to this, but when a player is nominated in the auction sometimes influences how much they go for. So there's sometimes I want to hold off on the guy I want, and other times if I think not too many other people are going to be in on the same guy as me, then I'll go ahead and get him nominated right away, and everybody will be saving their money for somebody else.
More of a redraft question, but I wanted to follow up. You guys brought up the Lamar Jackson season in 2019. Do we feel like people are projecting and ranking quarterbacks better? It just seems like there's less bargains out there this year, where I feel like the market is kind of correct in their approaches. Or do you guys have different thoughts on that?
Well, as it applies to auction, I don't think it's changed prices very much. I mean, I'm surprised that those kind of running quarterbacks are still going for the prices that they are, which to me is pretty cheap. Okay. It's corrected more in redraft, but in auction, I don't think it really has. I think people have more just gotten used to a certain price for a quarterback, and it's a fairly deep inventory as it is. So their prices haven't changed that much to me.
I think what's happening this year is people are comfortable with like the 10th through 12th best quarterbacks. If you're looking at like guys like Stafford, Brady, Lance, people don't mind using those guys. And I think because there's less of a risk of maybe getting completely shut out at quarterback, I think that's what's sort of driving what we're seeing with, Kyler, Lamar, Hurts, maybe going in the $6 to $9 range, or maybe $7, $9 range, when those are typically $13, $15 players at an auction.
Yeah, this could be the year that we see $1 Aaron Rodgers.
Absolutely could. It's just very interesting. It's probably more of a redraft question, but it just seems like the market has kind of corrected itself. I think that last year people were getting Hurts at kind of a little bit of a discount. He beat his ADP. You're seeing Mahomes 2 years ago, Lamar Jackson, and then this year it seems like it's corrected. Just an interesting thought. Wanted to get into tracking of the auction. do you do anything to track what other team owners are doing during the auction, or are you mostly just looking at the board and, of course, your own budget and team? Maybe start with Dan on this one.
Yeah, so I track it during the auction. I have my laptop with me, and I have a spreadsheet up where I can just put in, like how many dollars each player went for, so I can track it for the next auction. Is one of the things I want to do. And then the other thing I do is I just put it into a grid where I have each of the owners 1 through 12. And, if owner number 3 spends $33 on a player, I'll just put $33 there. And then that also will just let me know, it'll update for me, what's their maximum bid that they can make, which comes into play as we start to get, like a third to a half of the way through the auction. I want to know what people's maximum bid is. I also want to know what's the average that they can spend per player that they have remaining. And the other thing that my spreadsheet does is I track the total number of dollars that have been spent in the auction versus the total number of players that have been purchased in the auction. So, we know at the end of these, like a 12-team, 20-player auction, 240 players are going. So if we're 120 players in and 67% of the budget has been spent, that there's still 33% that's going to this last half. That would be a lot. Most of the time, it's going to be more like you get halfway through the auction and 75-80% of the budget has been spent, and most of what's left is going to be $1, $2 players the rest of the way. But I'll just track how that, how the total dollars remaining versus the total number of players remaining to be bought is going, and that kind of helps me figure out, what my strategy is going to be as we're moving through the different stages of the auction as well.
Jack?
Well, Dan puts numbers to what I've always kind of done innately. Because I know what the prices are going to be, I know whether there's been a number of guys being bought for more and higher prices than what my numbers suggest. And since I've seen how these auctions flow for the rest of the time, I'll know whether there's a lot of money being spent. Dan has the numbers. I don't, but I know it. So I can adjust, and I don't need a specific number on that, and nothing that there's wrong with it. It gives you more of an idea. I always look at an auction board. NFFC's made it super easy. They have them on the computer now, and it's right there. So even on the live ones, you put it on your computer. But for those that don't have that, I still have my own spreadsheet in front of me with 20 slots for every single player, and I write them in because I love to see in one spot real fast who needs what, who needs a tight end, who needs a quarterback. Because, if there's 3 guys that still need quarterbacks, but my guy's still out there, I might start changing nominations to either buy my guy or have them fill up their spots. So I always want to know exactly what's going on for who has what for starters and where they're at on reserves.
Chris?
Yeah, for me, I would say this is an area where focus is really required in the draft, because I'll have my list and that'll have, those average auction values of what I expect people to go for. I don't necessarily pay too close of attention to it, other than I can clearly tell if it's, higher or lower than what we're typically seeing, which, if prices are higher than what we're expecting them to be, I know there are going to be values later. I just have to balance that with not getting left out of the top tier players. Going back to our earlier lessons on, you don't want to get shut out of those top 2 round talents. And so it's a constant balancing act of, I know there will be values later versus I don't want to be left out of the top tier of players.
I wanted to follow back up. You bring up focus. We've done, like Chris, if we're in Vegas, you might draft 4 teams in a day in a redraft league. I know I'll do the same. How many auctions would you be comfortable doing in a day, like high stakes auctions? How many, like, until the point where you're incredibly fried from it?
I was fried after 3 last year. I have a day with 4 this year. So,
yeah,
that's a tough one.
I think I'm just going to collapse of the Park MGM or Bellagio or wherever we are, I'll probably just be sleeping in the ballroom that night.
And you have to locate the best coffee spot in the casino as well, and keep caffeinating, I would imagine as well.
For sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Jack?
Yeah, I've done 3, and on that last one, I was tired going in, and I just said I'm going to buy 3 really expensive guys and sit back for a while because I'm really tired. That's what I did.
What a shocking change from your usual strategy, Jack.
But as that third guy, that'd be the swing guy. So when I have like 3 guys that were 42 to 45 or something like that, then I need to sit back for a while and wait for some bargains for about an hour.
Yeah, your strategy definitely can change the point at where your focus has to get super intense on an auction, without a doubt. One of the things I also look at, and Jack kind of alluded to it, I think, but when you're looking at the list, or at the board, it's not like a snake draft where it's going from the best players, on down to the worst players in an auction. Those players can be in any order, so you might see, the second player on team 3's list of players that they own might be a complete bench guy. So you have to keep track of not only, do they have 2 running backs yet, but do they have 2 starting running backs? So I kind of make mental notes. Do I think this guy is a starter guy or a bench guy for him? And what positions are they looking for? How does their team look in general? Is it, do I think they're probably, they got to shore up that wide receiver room, or does it seem like they're really trying to attack running back strong or whatever? So I'll just make little notes on that too, as I'm tracking and try to make sure that I have an idea of where I think they might be going.
Yeah, it's there's a reason that they do that a lot of the players that are doing that big auction on Friday are not doing the 6 p.m. prime time, and they're maybe taking that one off. It's the mentally taxing aspect of the auction that I think is kind of overwhelming for some players to definitely do multiple ones in a day. And a big hat tip to Jack for being able to handle 3, and Chris
4.
Quite possibly a psycho move to do 4, but that's a whole nother story.
I'm hoping to make my stamp in the Guinness Book of World Records one day, and just training up for it.
100%. It's mental fortitude as much as focus, I guess. Wanted to keep focusing on the strategy aspect, but I want to get into the in-auction strategy part of it. How do you decide who to nominate when it's your turn, Dan?
So that can kind of depend on, where we're at in the auction, what players I'm looking for. Early in the auction, I'm likely, if I win at early nominations, I tend to do the same thing as Jack. I'll throw out a guy that I want and see if I can sneak him through for a good price. A lot of times I will throw out, fairly early in the process, I'll throw out players I'm not so much interested in, that I think that lots of other people in the auction are going to be interested in, because I want to pull some money out of the auction before I start having to bid seriously against these people. That's not always possible, but every little bit you can do definitely helps. But then it also helps every once in a while to mix in a player that you do want, as you're going through, because if you kind of become known as the guy who's always throwing out somebody you don't want, that can be a tell. So every now and then you want to throw out a guy that you do want, and come in on the bid on that.
How about you, Jack?
It really totally depends on the flow of the auction for me. It's pretty rare when I will just throw out a guy to try to draw money off the board. About the only time I ever do that is if we're getting toward the end of a tier and the prices are kind of nutty, right? If you're getting toward like the end of RB1s and you can see guys are starting to panic, then I'll throw out another one like that. But usually every one of my nominations has a specific purpose for where I'm trying to get. I worry a lot more about my team and how I think nominations could help or not help. So most of the time I'm looking for ways that I can prove my lot either now or down the line, but it's just so dependent on what's going on. I got the first nomination in New York on Friday. I'm in the number 1 spot, so I can't give away too much because I'm not sure which way I'm going yet. But it's probably going to be aggressive.
That's awesome.
$1
No, I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
$1 kicker.
Yeah.
100%. How about you, Chris?
I'm usually trying to read the room, and I'm also taking into account whether I think prices are going for too high or too low. Let's say, Jack, using his earlier example, had thrown out DeAndre Swift and he goes for something I feel is cheap, $38, and maybe I win him even. As soon as that happens, I'm trying to find a similar player that I think will provide a similar bargain. Maybe I throw out some guy who goes right in that range, like a Saquon Barkley or someone like that, thinking, okay, well, maybe I can also get Saquon Barkley for $38. On the flip side, if Swift's going for 47, then I'll throw out Saquon Barkley because I want someone else to spend 47, 48. And so it can really go both ways in terms of why you nominate a player, and you can nominate the same player for different reasons.
Yeah, you know what? I'll add on this. In an auction I was doing the other night, there was a huge running back just run going on and on and on. And it got to my nomination. I'm like, I need to mix things up here because guys are just on this flow. So I threw in like a mid-range quarterback that I might have been interested in because all of a sudden guys will have to adjust their focus and their thinking. You just never know. You just never know where all of a sudden you might get a guy $1 or $2 lower if they're not really, focused on that position. So
this sounds like a super outdated example, but it's one that what you just mentioned is something I've absolutely observed. I initially thought I could throw out a hot player at any point in an auction that maybe I wasn't too keen on and extract a lot of money out of the other auction players. And I remember there was one year where Jermichael Finley was just a really hot player for the Packers, and everyone, he was everyone's favorite early 3rd round pick. And I threw him out at a period where it had just gone through a string of running backs, and it was just crickets because people weren't prepared to adapt from, that running back to, oh, where did Jermichael Finley come from? And so I've observed the same thing where if you throw out something different from whatever the pattern is, it can sort of slow bidding a little bit.
And that's a great segue. How does the timing of nominations influence player pricing? So if Jack decided to throw out Justin Jefferson as the first pick in the auction Friday, what would that do to the wide receiver pricing for the room? Would it necessarily make them more expensive, at least the elite guys, potentially make them a little more affordable? Take this any way you want. Start with Dan on this one.
So in a way, when you throw out an anchor player like that, it's going to kind of help to set the market for the rest of them, because people will be looking at how much did this player sell for, how much did I think he was going to sell for, was that high, was that low, so if he sells for a low price, they might become emboldened to throw out more wide receivers, and everybody will look and say, well, I think Devontae Adams should be going for $8 less than Justin Jefferson or something like that. And so they'll kind of anchor onto those prices a little bit. And every once in a while, though, you'll have a price where everybody realizes, oh, we should have been bidding on that. That was a really good price, and it won't affect the other prices as much. If they see that was a really good deal, probably it's not going to have as much of an effect. But if they felt like it was a fair price, it's going to kind of anchor things right on down the list a little bit.
Jack or Chris?
Yeah, I'll say that with a guy like that, 12 guys are going to know what his average auction value is on NFFC. So if he's a $50 player, he's going to go for 50 at least. And because I'd pay at least 50 for him as an anchor guy. But there's usually 1 or 2 guys that are going to say, Justin Jefferson, right? All right, he's one of my guys. I'm going to go up to 53 and get this thing going. If there's another aggressive guy in there and they really like him, they'll pay a couple extra, I think, as on the first bid. I don't expect a cheap one on a guy like him.
I might pay 60 for Justin Jefferson.
And I'd let you have him.
There you go.
And first I'd read and see, I can tell Theo's going to go up to 60, so I'll just keep going up, and then I'll have you overpay for him.
Without a doubt. And I would happily overpay for Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, let's say he does go for 50. I really do think it sets the market, because no one wants to pay $52 or $53 for Chase if someone got away with paying 50 for Jefferson. I feel like people don't like getting ripped off, and if they see a better bargain, they that sort of weighs on them psychologically is to being willing to spend more on the next guy, even if Jefferson went for too cheap.
They might pay 53 for him if he's the last of, let's say, the top 4, right? Cup, Jefferson, Chase, Diggs. And if Chase is the last one coming out and they were dead set on buying a top 4 wideout, they might pay 53, 54. I've seen guys do that.
Yep.
But you always want to avoid the last of the tier in my book.
That's the sort of thing you see in home league auctions where people don't really budget as much, and then you'll all of a sudden wide receiver 22 and 23 and 24 are going for comparable prices as like wide receiver 9 because some guy realizes I need to get this wide receiver.
Theo, it happens in Vegas and New York too.
Yeah.
It does.
Can't take it with you, right?
Yep.
What role does psychology play? I'm sorry, Dan, you had more to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, that also timing can really matter as far as like how much when a guy goes up for auction, how much money is left, who can bid on him can make a big difference because, just taking a look at last year, we had 2 identical auctions that were run back to back. And there were actually some people in both of the auctions for FFPC. But DJ Moore in the first auction goes for 25, and the second auction he goes for 16. Jamar Chase went for $22 in the first auction, went for $8 in the second auction. So you can see some really, really big discrepancies from auction to auction on different players, kind of depending on, where they went in the auction, like if they were nominated early or late or whatever. And honestly, I don't remember what was the case with Chase. I'm really curious. When I was looking back on that, I was like, I need to go back and check and see where Chase was. I got a photo of the auction board that will help me out a little bit. But
yeah, he was going for 8 to 12 across I think both formats from what I was seeing last year. People were really nervous.
Yeah, but somebody bid the heck out. There was definitely a bidding war in one of them. So because when he went for $22, that was way out of bounds of what I was expecting. I thought that was like a super high price. I was expecting somewhere in the probably $10 to $14 range. I think was what I was looking for. So it just really can make a difference where they go in the nomination order.
God forbid a guy drops a pass in the preseason, right, Chris?
Can't happen.
100%.
Trash.
What role does psychology play in your auction game? Anybody want to take this one?
We got to let Jack go on this one.
All right, I absolutely love it. It's like it literally is my favorite part of the auction. Okay, one of my things is how I bid. I always try to mix it up. Sometimes I'm quiet, sometimes I'm loud, and it's really funny. Sometimes when I get really loud and put a loud number out there, some guys just like back off. It's the craziest thing, right? Mixing up the pace. Sometimes I'll be really fast with it. Other times I'll bid early. Sometimes I'll bid late. So guys can't really pick up on what you're doing. But that part I just love. Sometimes, I'll kind of look at them and just give them different looks because I find that's fun. And some guys just, stare at their computer and they don't look up, Dan Williamson. So I'm just teasing you. So that's just part of it. And, you pick up on things on guys. Some guys will only bid to win. So if you know that, and I've seen that with certain guys over the years, if they're bidding, they're in it to win. And you can bid them up. And there's certain players they like I've seen from year to year, and you just keep bidding them. So it's that part's awesome. And also, there's some guys that are really, really bound to the average auction value. They see those numbers and it's like their gospel that I can't go above this number because then I'm paying too much. And like, seriously. And you can tell they stop bidding at a certain number because they know it. So all that stuff is just so much fun for me and how I'm bidding. I see
Chris, how do you think?
Can't
No,
wait.
I just have a lot of fun with it, to be honest. I don't know if it actually provides any advantage, but like I'm definitely told to tone down the theatrics if I like nominate, Leonard Fournette and I call him and I really want him, so I start off by calling him fat and all these other insulting terms and how he's injury prone, and I'll start an auction with that. Or if a player gets hurt on if let's say Gabe Davis sprains an ankle and he's out 2 weeks after the first game, I'll be sure to mention before I nominate him. I'll be like, may or may not go on IR, might be gone for a while, but I'll throw Gabe Davis out there for $3. And so I don't know how much that actually works, but it's fun for me.
And you said that you're told to relax on the theatrics. There's no rules with that. Is the auctioneer just like, take it easy, Chris?
Oh no.
Or other players just busting your balls?
I've been in auctions and given guys crap. I don't even know them.
Yeah,
like if I see something
good.
funny and it's not like really going to piss them off, I'll start teasing them. And that's half the fun. I'm like, yeah, they're probably mad at me, but that's okay. If they're mad at me, that means they're not paying as much attention. But I'm not going to be a total jerk and something like that. But that's fun. That's
yeah.
No, sometimes
I'm the same way. I would, I'm not going to be a jerk, but if I see somebody starting to tilt a little bit, and I think I can nudge them into a little bit more of a tilt without being a total dick about it, I'll do it. I have no problem with that, because if they're off their game, if they're more focused on something that happened in the auction rather than the auction that is actually going on around them, that's a win for everybody else, basically. So I don't have any problem with that. The other thing I like to do is I like to kind of vary the pace of my bids. Some people get a little bit more intimidated. If they bid 17, you come right back with 18 immediately. It can intimidate them. Other guys, it doesn't have any effect on, and then there are some people who can't stand it when you wait until the auctioneer is about to say sold, and then you just come in with that that last second bid, and you can sometimes frustrate them out of continuing the bid. Yes, Chris.
Exactly.
Because they think they got that player and they don't, and depending on how they react too, and whether I really want that player or not, sometimes I can use that to kind of just see if I can shove the bidding up a little bit higher if I don't want that player. Just try to see if I can squeeze a couple extra dollars out of them.
And then you give them a comment afterwards, like, "Oh yeah, you're so close. You almost had him." Oh,
that's awesome.
$1.
Yep.
That's a good segue. Do you ever price enforce or bid on players that you do not want? And why would you do that? We'll start with Chris on this one.
I don't do that very often. Even I would say I'm involved. I would say I'm involved in like almost half the bids, because I'm usually not targeting specific players too much. But I tend not to try to enforce, just because I've seen too many instances where someone ends up with that second QB for $5, just trying to enforce the guy who didn't have a QB, and taking on any type of risk that's going to benefit 11 other people at the risk of your own team. Usually that math isn't worth it for me.
I will never price enforce on guys with bad NFL buzz going on, okay? Because that raises the specter that I'm going to get stuck with them. Since I usually know where the prices are, even if it's a guy I don't really like but I think will still sell, I'll go to anywhere from 4 or 5 below that average auction value, because someone's willing to pay up another $1 or $2. But I never put a number in if I'm not willing to get stuck with them. Never. Because I got stuck a few times early on in my career, and that just throws everything off. So if I'm going to price enforce, I know, all right, if I'm going to buy him, I'll pay this before I throw out that number.
Yeah, I think that's really key, because sometimes, one thing I'll do is, if somebody says Jamar Chase $2 and then somebody else says $5, I'm going to be the guy who goes out there and goes 45. Let's get this thing moving. But the key is you don't want to put out a number that's going to be high enough where you might all of a sudden end up with a player you don't want. Now Jamar Chase, that's not going to be a problem, but say I'm really not in on Leonard Fournette, I throw out a price at $27 or something like that. I could end up owning Leonard Fournette. Everybody, it could be just crickets after I throw out that price. So you do want to go a little bit low, and as Jack said, just don't ever get too cute with players you really don't want, because something bad can happen for sure.
Shows you the power of Chris Eibl's mental game, where you don't want Leonard Fournette for anything because Chris has you thinking how fat he is right now.
Exactly.
So there you go.
That's exactly what it is. All I can think of now is Fat Lenny.
Yeah, I'll be when I announce my bid, I'll be like shoving a giant fork of spaghetti in my mouth as I'm talking to. So.
He'll be obese Lenny by Friday. Guys, how about some price enforcement horror stories? Either for yourself. I know that you've got to remember one in the past, or have we seen any high stakes guys that we know really get jammed recently in drafts you've been in trying to do this price enforcement?
I learned my lesson way back in the days of what was it, Chris Conway with the Bears? Was that
Curtis?
Curtis Conway, that's it. I still vividly remember to this day. I threw out an opening bid of $14 on him, thinking he was going to go for like 18 or 19. And I didn't want him. I was just throwing him out there to try to pull some money out of the auction. I mean, there was just crickets going on. Nobody said a word. I'm like, okay, I guess he's mine. That was my lesson.
I honestly don't remember. It's been so long where I've been in one of those where I've really gotten stuck on a big number that it's been at least 10 or 12 years, so I don't recall any specific ones.
Yeah, I would never make a mistake like that.
No,
there you go. Absolutely not. What is your early auction strategy? I know we touched upon it where, Chris, you brought up, potentially bidding out your kicker. But what's your overall early strategy for auctions?
Aside from wanting to maybe initiate those onesie positions where I can maybe get a better value, I really am, like Jack, usually probably trying to collect 2 to 3 top 15 players. And so for me, I'm interested in finding out what they're going for as soon as possible. And so I can quickly adjust if they're going for a price that isn't to my liking. I'm willing to adjust, but I always sort of have that as a goal, and then I'm willing to modify that strategy pretty quickly if the value is not there.
Jack?
Well, one of the things I mentioned this publicly a little while ago, so I'll mention it again. I like putting out a mid-tier guy early because guys aren't used to it. Right. So it could be a running back. It could be a wide receiver. Everyone's almost preconditioned to put up big numbers for the big players because most guys will nominate the big guys first. And then it's another psychological thing where guys just there's a pool of guys. There could be 10 or 12 wideouts that all fall within a range of, $10 to $12, and they're happy with a number of them. So they don't bid very high or hard on those. And a lot of times I've gotten really nice values on guys early that are mid-tier guys that fit my plan, right? I might have 1, 2, 3 guys. If I get any one of those, great. But now I have one of my slots filled in my plan, and usually for $1 or $2 under budget. So that's one of my favorites. I think that works really well in auctions with guys that haven't, heard exactly what that strategy is like tonight. So that's not going to work very well in the next 2 weeks. But for guys that are in their home auctions or whatnot, I think that's a great way to do things.
I want to add, I think that's like very clearly builds on what you said earlier, where you throw out a different position tier. People aren't necessarily prepared to look at a certain part of their cheat sheet or list. Just it's not going to be on the top of their mind if that position hasn't been brought up recently. And a lot of people are like me too, where they're thinking about can I get a couple of these top tier players? Oh, I didn't think about, Cortland Sutton or whatever. And so I think the advantage there is really getting bids out there for players people just aren't expecting to think about at that stage of the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And every now and then you can get by with throwing out a position player that you think is going to be a dollar player and throw them out there early in the draft, because sometimes if you throw them out too early in the middle part of the draft, they'll go for a little bit more because people start to get desperate at position. But if you can throw out like Boston Scott or somebody like that for $1, the odds are if you're early in the auction, nobody's gonna say, oh, I'm gonna spend $2 on Boston Scott. He's probably gonna come to you for $1. If that's got one of the guys that you really don't mind having as a backup anyway, you've just got that one under your belt, and now you're one player closer to being finished, and you've got one of those dollar guys that you're not going to have to fight for later when things start to get really tight.
That's tough, though. That's tough because I've started high stakes auctions with a guy like when Alexander Madison, you knew he was the backup for the Vikings. I'm thinking I can get him for $2. And I've started with Madison for $2 because I think I'm going to put him right on my roster, and someone goes $3. And then you're like, that was a waste. You think you're going to get him? You should go for $2? No. So.
Well, yeah. And that's a good point. I mean, it's got to be a player that you like that's not a player that very many people like. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Not on the show sheet, but you bring up a $2 to $3 player. Who are some of your guys' greatest hits? I know you remember somebody who you got for less than $5 who was absolutely smashed.
Absolutely, for me, it was Lamar Jackson in 2019. It was like 3 different auction leagues. He was one of my targets. It was an article that somebody wrote, and I read like 5 days before I went out to Vegas, and that makes a lot of sense. And then I just kept doing it, and it worked out really well.
Anyone for you, Dan?
For anybody who's looking behind me, you'll see the Baylor flags there. RG3 is a rookie. I got him for $1. Didn't even get another quarterback in the auction. That was my only guy. I was like, if I need another guy, I'll pick him up later. And he took me to the title.
Shout out to the Baylor Bears. Anyone for you, Chris?
The couple that I remember are probably 2012, the first of a ongoing 10-year run of NFFC auction championships. Alfred Morris for under $5. And then I think I had one of my better years in 15 when I remember there was some ambiguity around Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, and I was a big believer in Freeman's ability to catch passes a little better than Coleman at the time.
RB1 overall that year. That's a good one.
And that's a great lesson. This is one that I learned the hard way from Jack. I've learned a few lessons the hard way from Jack, but we were sitting in an auction next to each other as it happened, and he got Tevin Coleman for like $5, and then he got Devonta Freeman for $4 or something like that. I don't even remember what it was, but you got basically the Atlanta starting backfield for $9, $10, $11, and it just never really occurred to me that hey, I didn't really want to bid on him because I wasn't sure who was going to be the guy, and Jack was like, no, I'm just going to take them both. I don't care. Yeah.
I look for those combinations. About 2 weeks ago, I said, "Oh, this Houston backfield, I'm going to buy Dameon Pierce and Marlon Mack for about $7 or $8. It's going to be beautiful, man." And look what's happened. Mack gets cut, and Damien's going to be about 15 to 20 at this point. So, not going to work. But if you can find those cheap backfields like that where you think someone's going to emerge, it's a good way to do it if you're looking for a second or third running back like that.
It's definitely more conducive in an auction format than it would be in a redraft where, using your 8th round pick and your 10th round pick on the same backfield can really backfire. But in an auction, I guess it's all a matter of dollars. So I think that's
Right.
that's a very interesting strategy.
Yeah, you just have to be willing to, whatever the total is for the two players, you need to be willing to allot that to whoever, comes out on top. And also, you need to be kind of sure that somebody is going to come out on top, and I think that was part of the deal too, was I was just not sure that anybody was going to emerge with that job between Devonta and Tevin, and Jack was a little bit more sure of it than I was. So he was willing to put that bid out there, and I hung back. So that's that. The only thing that could have hung Jack up is if it ended up being a split backfield. Neither one of them was really worth that much.
It's not that much money though. By the time,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, $9 total or $10 total isn't going to make you or break you.
What is your guys' strategy for when you're in the middle part of an auction, when most of the big ticket players are gone?
Jack is waiting for the $1 bids when he can bid again.
I cannot dispute that too much.
Well, how about for the guys who have a little more money left in the tank? How about
there is always a point in the auction where Jack says, "I think I'm going to go to the bathroom and get a beer."
There you go.
See, there's strategy behind that, right? It's perfect.
Exactly.
No, to me, it all just depends. Even if I got three, 4, 5 slots filled up, I'm always looking at who's my primary target at what number, and guys that would also fit that slot. So I might have 3 or 4 guys there, and so if one of those alternative guys come up and the price is right, I'll buy that player rather than waiting on the last guy that's my preferred, because I don't want to get stuck at the end of a tier. So I'll take one and put him in and try, just as long as you have alternatives that fit the plan like that. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for at that point. It's filling out the rest of my lineup with guys that would work.
Yeah, I would say if I'm in the middle of part of a draft and I didn't acquire as many top level players as was ideal, and I still had a lot of money, I'm just constantly analyzing. I'm constantly trying to break out my list at that point into tiers of like, okay, who else is going to make this money worth it to spend on? Because I don't want to, and this is the biggest mistake that people make, even in high stakes live drafts. I do not want to be the guy who has money on the table at the end of the draft. That hasn't been a problem for me in the past, but that's like wake up in the middle of the night nightmare type stuff for me. So I do not want to have $10 and have to throw it on, Kenneth Gainwell or something. But I was going to say, I was trying to come up with someone a little more exciting, but yeah, and so the key for me in always balancing that out is if I do have more money on the table than everyone else, I better have a plan to make use of it, because if that next tier of players slips and I'm not involved, then I'm stuck with a bag of nothing.
And how do player tiers factor into your strategy for Dan and Jack? I know Chris just brought him up.
Well, only to the extent I know if there's certain guys I have budgeted in at a certain number, I'll know that tier of players. And I refuse to get caught with the last bidding on the last player in that tier, because I'm not going to pay an extra 4 or 5, nor do I usually have the money to do that. So I'm always looking ahead to avoid that. So when it comes to those kind of tiers, it can always drop down a tier, but that changes things up a little bit for what I'm trying to do.
I think that's why identifying those tiers as soon as possible when you're in that middle stage is really important, because if you have to get 3 or 4 players in that tier to sort of justify all the money you have, like Jack said, you do not want to be in a position where you're bidding up some mid-level player to $20, $25 because you have to, and he's the only guy left.
Right, and sometimes you might find that especially at this point in the auction, the difference between a $4 guy and a $6 guy is actually can be large, depending on how much money you have left. And if you were thinking you were going to be able to get 3 wide receivers for $4 to fill out your one of your flex position or 2 of your flex positions and a bench position or something like that. and it ends up they're going for $6 each, you might have to switch gears and say, well, I can get 2 of these guys for $6, and I'm going to have to drop down a tier on the last guy, and still try to salvage something out of it. But usually in the middle of the auctions, one of the things I like to try to do is if I can find players that are at values that I like to try to stack them up and get a few players ahead of everybody else to the point where I can kind of then be a little bit more choosy in who I'm bidding on and how much I'm bidding, because I already, like I might have 13 or 14 players on my roster, and some people still only have 5. I think that puts me in a little bit more of a position of strength because I don't have as many spots to fill. I probably don't have as much money either, but sometimes I might have as much money depending on what their bidding strategy was and my bidding strategy. So I always look at it as, I know Jack and I have talked about this, when whoever has the most money and the least players to buy, they're the ones with the hammer in the auction because they can get anybody that they want. I don't necessarily need to be the hammer, but I want to be in the neighborhood of whoever has the hammer so that I can at least threaten them, even if I can't use it myself.
What are good ways to bleed your opponents of auction dollars? Start with Chris on this one.
I'm really not as focused as much on trying to bleed other players, but I do, like I said, if players I feel like they're going too much, I'm going to try to nominate similar players, but that's really the best I can do. I don't want to mess up my own team to try to bleed a couple extra dollars from someone else.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. If you know that, just looking at who has 2 starting running backs and who doesn't, you might want to nominate a running back for one of those teams if it's the end of a tier, right? And that's one way to do it, but it's a tough thing to do. I mentioned, I knew a couple of guys that if they were bidding to win. So the best way to bleed there is just bid them up. And that's a very dangerous thing unless you know the people and you know that they're like that and they just bid to win. So you have to know the guys for that to work.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I don't really have much to add there.
And how do you handle your end game strategy? Do you have any tips for how to get your guy when you can barely afford to raise a bid?
Don't be greedy. It's really all about when you have $1 or $2. You really need to read the rooms, see what players are going for, and take your best educated guess on what the very best $1 player is that you don't think anyone will bid $2. It makes me so mad when people bid $1 players that should clearly be $2 players and they get away with it. That's probably the thing that makes me angriest. I think Bill Wasowski bid like $1 on Sterling Shepard last year in a 14-team auction and actually got him, and I was just irate. but for the most part, I think that's a mistake. A mistake I see others make is throwing $1 players out that someone's going to throw like a Darrell Henderson out for $1 or something like that, and there's just no way he's going to go for $1. You've wasted your bid. And so all you can do is make those educated guesses. I would say I'm 50-50 at that stage when I'm trying to make those guesses and getting it right.
Yeah, you have no control over who's going to go 2. I'll try to have one of those guys that I think I'm going to get, and someone will go 2. And then the next nomination will be a much better player than I just put up, and he goes for 1. Like, I never would have thought that would have happened.
Right.
That's happened to me countless times. It's just a guessing game. But the one thing I always do is I always make my list ahead of time of the end game players so that I'm ready. So I don't have to scramble looking at sheets like what other $1 player can I nominate. It's such a simple thing to do for preparation and gives you plenty of time to scan the sheet and figure out who you want to put up when you have those guys that you like and that you want to try to secure for $1 or $2.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit frustrating, when you keep throwing out, well, this guy's going to go for $1, and inevitably somebody bids 2, and sometimes you can go through like 3 or 4 turns of nominations, and if you really don't have any extra dollars to go up to 2 yourself on anything else, you're kind of stuck. It's almost like a helpless feeling because you just, you can only win when you throw out your own nomination. And if somebody constantly trumps it with a 2, what do you do? You're just stuck. Which is one of the reasons why I like to have just kind of a couple extra dollars when I get down to those last couple players, if I possibly can. Sometimes you just can't do it. I mean, if it comes down to getting that better starter, or having that last dollar or two, I'd rather have the better starter. But every now and then you get to the point in an auction where you're like, yeah, I think I can hang on to, I can have $5 left for my last 3 players or something like that, where you have the ability to go to 2. And then, also when you're in that kind of medium range, you really have to pay attention to what do you think the player is going to sell for? Because if you think a player is going for $3, and somebody puts them out there for $1, you do not want to be the person who says 2, because you've just pretty much guaranteed that somebody else is going to go 3. You don't want to go 4. So, you're stuck. So when you raise bids in those parts of the auction, you want to make sure that you've got, either you're going to be happy with the bid you just made, or that you can go not only $1 more, but $2 more to get to where you want to be, if that makes sense.
Well, we've hit an hour 20. This was tremendous, and a shout out to Dan. The questions were really, really, really well organized and well thought out. And I thank you both for being so forthright with your strategy for such successful players. To be able to share that was very generous. We have a question, a redraft question that we've asked every single Go District guest since we ended our Dynasty Rookie Draft focused shows, including Billy Wazowski. He answered this question as well. Right now, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, and Justin Jefferson are the top 3 wide receivers everywhere in terms of ADP. Who would be your best bet to be the wide receiver 1 overall if it's not one of those 3? Start with Chris. And we'd still like some honesty here, Chris, even though we're a couple of days away.
Initial reaction, I'm really torn between Lamb and Adams. I think they both have very unique paths there. Lamb, there's literally nobody else at the moment, unless you count Dalton Schultz, for target competition. I would lean towards Devontae Adams. I imagine Derek Carr doesn't want to be looked at as the guy who brought down Adam's stats from what Rodgers always gave him. They're buddies. They have that connection. I think there's going to be a real effort to maybe pump up Adam's stats there. Not when I've thought about it, but I'd have a tough time between those guys. But I'm going with Adams.
So the question was not one of those top 3. Who else?
Your best bet outside of the top 3.
I don't know if he's the best bet, but I'll tell you one who's in my mind is grossly undervalued is Tyreek Hill. And I haven't heard a lot about him, to be honest, from people talking about him, but they paid him an insane amount of money specifically to be in that offense. And just some of the glimpses we've seen in the summer with him, he's just so unbelievable watching him play. Get the ball in his hands, and they're going to throw him short passes and let him do his Tyreek Hill thing. I could see him being one of the top receivers in outside, an outside low probability one maybe, but I'll throw out Tyreek Hill.
And I'll say that is you brought up the fact that a lot of people are not on him. You are the first guest that said Tyreek Hill, which is actually pretty unbelievable to think about for a player of his stature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of a hidden thing going to Jack's point also is that Waddle hasn't practiced in about 3 weeks, so that I was not on Tyreek, but I'm starting to get a little bit more interested in him, if for no other reason than just that.
Yeah, I took him at the 2-3 turn after Christian McCaffrey FFPC main event. He's the kind of player that even if you're not all in on him, if you're drafting for volume, you definitely do not want to miss out on, because I think the things Jack brought up could absolutely happen, and there's a chance it's just Tyreek smash season. So Dan, why don't you close us out here?
All right, yeah. So again, thanks guys for coming on. We really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody that was listening in got something out of it. I know we had a couple players that had approached me about what do I do for auctions, and I said, well, start off with listen to the show, and if you have other questions, let me know afterwards. But I think we gave people a pretty good base to go off of. And again, if you guys don't mind giving your Twitter handles where people can find you, that'll be helpful. If they have any questions or anything, both these guys, hit them up on Twitter. They'll answer your questions. I can pretty much guarantee it. But unless your name is Billy Wazowski and you're trying to find out what what they're going to spend on a particular player, you might not get as far. Jack,
I hope he gets Sterling Shepard again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mine's at Jack Haan Law, and Haan is it's spelled right there at Jack Haan Law.
And I'm
all right.
at Chris Eibl, Chris EIBL.
All right, sounds good. So thanks again, everybody. Once again, make sure you hit that like or subscribe button if you haven't done so. We really appreciate that. Also, make sure that you're getting out there on the FFPC. There's a lot of contests going on the FFPC right now. Some of them are still pretty far away from filling. I'm not going to use the overlay word yet, but there are some contests that they have that are looking a little juicy. The Football Guys contest and the Best Ball tournament, both they look like they might have some trouble filling. So if you're into overlay, those might be good ones to enter. And also, I believe until midnight tonight, you can enter that Best Ball tournament. It's normally $125 entry fee. It's $100 right now, which basically takes all the rake right out of it. So if you haven't put any entries in, or you haven't maxed it out yet, and you want to get some more entries in, now is a really great time to go ahead and get at least registered. You don't have to draft them all right this minute, but you just do need to get registered before midnight tonight. All right, and thanks a lot, guys, for joining in. And we are out of here.
Goat District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them.